In the purest and kindest year, I shared half of the meat bun my grandmother made, which was as big as my face, with my classmate Lucas Ryan, who was a bit of a misfit. From then on, whenever I had a bite of food, Lucas had half a bite too. In our sophomore year, Lucas was transferring schools. He was a love child, and his father finally acknowledged him. I left him a phone number. If your dad doesn't feed you well, call my grandma. 5 years later, while sorting through my grandmother's belongings, her phone suddenly rang. Grandma, I'm hungry. I cried on the other end, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't have my grandma anymore. Shortly after, Lucas's business car parked downstairs. Emily Foster, I'm sorry I'm late. I loved meat buns, thin skin, generous filling, and deliciously oily. My grandma had specially learned to make them for me. After my parents had just gotten a small apartment in the city to chase their dreams, my grandma brought me from the countryside to live with them. She said, "Girls need to see the world, you can't just stay in a remote mountain village." During our first year of high school, at dinner time, I pulled out a meat bun as big as my face from my backpack, ready to indulge. Next to me, Lucas was staring at my bun with longing. He was the least popular kid in class because he was a love child and his mom was sick, so no one paid attention to him. Feeling uncomfortable under his gaze, I finally asked, "Why aren't you eating in the cafeteria?" Lucas kept his eyes fixed on my bun, saying, "My mom needs money for her medicine. I don't have any money for dinner." It was only then I noticed that, despite his good looks, Lucas was extremely skinny, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. I swallowed hard, made up my mind, and broke half of my meat bun off, handing it to him. "I'm on a diet, I can't eat this much." Lucas hesitated, his hand hovering in the air, but when I placed the half in his palm, his eyes lit up. I thought to myself, if I don't feed him, he might just have to eat me. Thank you. Though the bun was a bit cold, it still tasted great. Lucas devoured it ravenously while I felt somewhat unsatisfied after finishing my half. I thought to myself, I should have given him less, I wasn't full yet. In the following days, every time my grandma brought me meat buns, I split them in half for Lucas. At first, I didn't want to share, but when I saw his pitiful big eyes, I softened. I pinched the flesh on my arms and looked at Lucas's bony frame. I thought, it wouldn't hurt to eat a little less. Lucas felt guilty for eating my buns without contributing, so he offered to tutor me. My English was terrible, but he excelled in it. He patiently taught me grammar and lent me his notes. Gradually, we became close. Sometimes we would walk home together after school. By that time, we were nearly adults, and our class was filled with youthful energy. If there was any unusual interaction between boys and girls, the whole class would find out. Lucas and I became the subject of rumors. Classmates in the back kept poking Lucas in the back with their pens, saying, "You, the love child, and her, the bumpkin, are a perfect match." Lucas became increasingly sullen, but he never fought back. He didn't want to cause trouble, especially without parental support. Until one day, when someone in class saw me breaking buns for Lucas, it was as if the whole class exploded. "I wondered why Lucas was being so nice to Emily. Turns out he's just a freeloader." Oh, Emily's such a fool for wasting her kindness on Lucas. His dad doesn't even want him, and she treats him like a treasure. No matter how they humiliated Lucas, he never reacted. However, when someone insulted me as foolish, Lucas grabbed a chair and rushed over, grabbing that person by the collar. "If you insult Emily again, I'll smash your head." Although Lucas was skinny, he wasn't short. After more than a month of my meat buns, he looked healthier, with a hint of muscle on his forearms. The class fell silent instantly. After all, it's surprising how much impact a seemingly innocuous person can have when they retaliate. Lucas lifted the chair leg, looking as if he might attack. From that day on, no one in class dared to speak a word against Lucas or me. I thought, next time my grandma makes buns, they should be bigger, as Lucas's appetite had grown. I started giving him 3/5, then 2/3 of my bun instead of just half. I felt like I was turning into bean sprouts. Every time I went home, my grandma would ask if I finished my meat buns. Not only did I finish them, I was still hungry. My parents worked in a factory and only came home once a month, so my grandma took care of me. I could sense my grandma's confusion. She made generous meat buns, yet her granddaughter seemed to be getting thinner. She pinched my face, murmuring to herself as she headed into the kitchen. "I guess I need to make them a bit bigger next time." At the end of year finals before the new year, both Lucas and I improved our grades by over 100 places. I moved from the middle of the pack to the upper middle, and Lucas jumped into the top 7 of the class. He often went hungry during evening self-study, which hurt his efficiency. Since he started eating my buns, he filled out nicely. Sometimes when he explained problems to me, I couldn't help but gaze at his face, because Lucas was incredibly handsome. Fortunately, he remained unpopular, and no one in the class noticed him, allowing me to enjoy his looks all to myself. During the winter vacation in our freshman year, my parents, my grandma, and I returned to the countryside to celebrate the new year. While packing his bag, I tilted my head towards Lucas and asked, "What are you going to do during the winter break?" "Work to earn money." Time flew by, and soon it was New Year's Eve. The courtyard of my rural home was piled high with bright red firecracker paper, and the Spring Festival gala on TV was counting down. I stood on the hillside in the backyard, wishing on the bright moon, "I hope Lucas can have enough to eat every year." As I contemplated taking back that wish and making another, the New Year's bell began to chime. Well then, having enough to eat is pretty good too. As the new semester began, everyone changed into lightweight spring clothes. My classmates were surprised to see that I had lost quite a bit of weight and looked much better than before. Meanwhile, Lucas had lost even more weight than he had before the break, so it looked like I would have to start feeding him again from scratch. One morning, Lucas walked in with his head down and didn't say a word. I greeted him, but he ignored me and pointed to my drawer. To my surprise, someone had stuffed a love letter into my drawer. I turned it over and over, realizing this was the first love letter I had ever received. Lucas snatched the letter from me. "It's just a scrap of paper. I could write you one too." Seeing his panicked expression made me laugh. He realized what he had just said and suddenly turned red, and we both looked down shyly. At the end of our first year of high school, I had jumped over 100 places in rankings, and Lucas had secured a spot in the top 3 of the class. To celebrate my achievement, my grandma prepared a lavish dinner. I invited Lucas to join us. With my parents away, my grandma cheerfully welcomed Lucas into the house. "You're so thin, if you eat my meat buns, there's no way you won't fatten up." Lucas and I exchanged glances and nearly burst out laughing. After dinner, I called him to my room to study. Lucas pulled a diamond-studded hairpin out of his pocket and clipped it into my hair. It looks really nice. I'll definitely replace those fake diamonds with real ones in the future." The sunlight streamed through the small window in my room, casting a warm glow on our faces. He suddenly bent down, quietly studying my face. The sunlight turned his hair and eyelashes golden. If only time could freeze at that moment, if only Lucas didn't have to transfer schools, if only my grandma hadn't passed away, how wonderful it would be. In the first semester of our sophomore year, Lucas became even more dazzling. He spoke from the podium as the top student, and all the girls in the school went crazy trying to sneak a look at him from our classroom door. When my grandma learned about my sharing meat buns with Lucas, she was both amused and exasperated. She said, "Whether I steam one or two, it's the same work, no need to complicate things. But you, my dear, are getting more clever. How is it that my buns are making him lose weight?" Now, both Lucas and I could eat until we were full. He had grown taller like a bamboo shoot. Now when I talked to him, I had to look up. One evening during self-study, the homeroom teacher suddenly called Lucas outside. He didn't say a word and just grabbed his backpack and dashed out. 3 days later, he returned to tidy up his desk, his head wrapped in white bandages. "Emily Foster, my dad wants to transfer me. We probably won't see each other for a long time." I sat in my seat, stunned, nodding slowly. I had forgotten to tell him that I had brought his favorite winter mushroom and pork buns in my backpack. Where are you going to school? We can still see each other after we graduate from high school. Lucas's long eyelashes were stuck together with tears as he turned his face away. I'm going abroad to study. I'm sorry, Emily. I don't have a choice. If we can meet again when I come back, could you? The class bell rang, and Lucas's knuckles turned white as he gripped his backpack. I handed him a phone number. If your dad doesn't feed you well, call my grandma. At that time, I didn't even have a phone, so I could only give him my grandma's number. Lucas walked out of the classroom with his backpack as usual. I thought, it's great that Lucas is so good at English, he'll adapt quickly abroad. The teacher was busy writing on the blackboard, while I didn't notice a few tears had fallen onto my hands. When I got home, my grandma saw the cold buns in my backpack and asked, "Why didn't your classmate eat his buns today?" It wouldn't be because he thinks grandma's cooking isn't good, right? I buried myself in the blanket. Lucas has transferred. I don't have to make his share anymore. After Lucas left, the empty seat next to me felt very strange. At dinner time, I ended up eating buns alone in my seat again. I started studying hard, trying to emulate Lucas. My once-weak English began to turn into my strong suit. Sometimes I would think to myself, maybe Lucas and I really were not meant to be. I had met his mother, even though she was ill, she was still very beautiful. Clearly, she had been raised well, and you could tell she was cultured. Lucas's dad could afford to send him abroad for school during high school, so they certainly weren't an ordinary family. In comparison, the meat buns I brought him felt insignificant. Lucas must be eating abalone and lobster every day now, having completely forgotten about meat buns. I got a new desk mate, Jason Lee. He was the one who had written me the love letter. But neither of us mentioned the letter again, and our communication was minimal. Throughout sophomore year, my grades skyrocketed, and I became 7th in the class. Looking at the spot where Lucas used to be on the report card, I couldn't help but smile, but quickly snapped back to reality. What was I smiling about? Lucas couldn't see it. Plus, wasn't I studying for myself? Before meeting Lucas, I hadn't been very passionate about studying. My parents didn't have a high level of education, yet they lived well and raised me well. But after becoming desk mates with Lucas, my enthusiasm for studying became tinged with a bit of selfish desire. Before I knew it, we were in junior year, and I was so busy preparing for the college entrance examination that I didn't have time to think about Lucas. Jason had remained my desk mate. Our seating arrangement was based on grades. I ranked slightly higher than him, so every time I chose a seat he would sit next to me. He always said he was used to sitting next to me by now. Until the college entrance examination, Lucas never called me. I even asked my grandma to pay attention to any strange numbers calling, since she sometimes got confused. Occasionally, I would take her phone and check the call log, finding one call from the UK. I immediately called back. "Hello, based on your credit, we can process a loan for you, with funds released as soon as the same day." I hung up quickly, thinking, what was that? When the college entrance exam results came out, I did pretty well. Securing a spot at a 211 university was a sure thing. My family was so excited that they almost created a new page in our family tree since, in our village, the number of college graduates could be counted on one hand, and I was the only one going to a prestigious university. My parents set up a tent in the village and threw a 3-day feast. As our class prepared for the graduation party, everyone was compiling a guest list. I suddenly asked in the group chat. Lucas Ryan was also part of our class. Does anyone have his contact information? The chat went silent for a long time until someone finally replied. "You mean that love child who transferred in sophomore year? The teacher said after his mom passed away, he went abroad. None of us have his contact info, not even the teacher." I awkwardly sent a sweating emoji. On the day of the party, after dinner, a group of us went to a KTV bar to sing. I drank a bottle of beer. My dad always said that one good drunk could solve 1,000 worries, and I wanted to see if that was true. Instead, I just felt the world spinning and a buzzing in my head. When I stepped outside for some fresh air, Jason followed me out. He supported my arm, worried I might fall. Looking at his face, I suddenly shouted, "Lucas, is that you?" Jason pressed his lips tightly together but continued to hold my arm. "Emily Foster, I really owe you." Then he called a taxi to take me home, and he didn't leave until I was safely inside. I was truly drunk at that moment, and later, when I remembered what he said, I pondered why Jason didn't just leave me outside the KTV to cool off. Jason applied to the same university as I did. He usually scored a few points less than me on exams, but in the college entrance exam, he scored over 20 points more than I did. The school he got into was indeed a bit beneath his talents. After all, we were high school classmates, and our parents naturally arranged for us to go together. Before we left, my grandma shakily followed me to the door and stuffed a handful of cash into my pocket. I pulled the crumpled bills out and returned them to her. "Grandma, we pay with phones in college. We don't use cash. Just keep it for yourself." Grandma still smiled. "Oh dear, I still haven't learned how to use WeChat Pay. Do you think this old lady is going to get dementia?" She added, "If you miss home, give me a call. Ever since you were little, you followed me around. Now that I can't see you for a while, it's really a bit hard to get used to." She smiled and gestured. I turned and walked downstairs. After I got a little distance away, I looked back and saw my grandma still watching me from the balcony. Going to college was really comfortable, aside from those formal rules. My roommates came from all over the country, and on the first day of school, our whole dormitory chatted until midnight. When we got to talking about being single, the dorm leader, Wang Tian, asked me, "Is that clean-cut boy who brought you here your boyfriend?" I chuckled and shook my head. "He's my high school desk mate. Our friendship is very pure. Don't read too much into it." The other three immediately looked at me with gossiping eyes. "Hey, the way he looks at you is almost like he's falling in love, and you say there's nothing going on." I looked down, twirling my hair with my fingers. "Actually, I have someone I like." After starting college, Jason began to dress better. He no longer wore those standard science boy checkered shirts, but switched to sporty hoodies and wide-leg pants. We still didn't communicate much, but we kept running into each other in different places. For instance, when I joined the calligraphy club, he was there too. When I ate in the cafeteria, he was sitting diagonally across from me, and I'd bump into him at elective classes with my roommates. If it weren't for the fact that we had been desk mates for a year, I might have thought he was my secret admirer. Even my roommates noticed how often we crossed paths and thought it was a bit unusual. His treatment of me also seemed to be different from how classmates typically interacted. Although he had written me a love letter before, I had always dismissed it as youthful ignorance and hadn't thought much of it. However, recently, things seemed to be developing in a direction I couldn't control. After the first semester of freshman year, I deliberately started avoiding Jason. I didn't walk home with him anymore and rarely initiated conversation. My roommate was right. "Emily, if you're not interested in him, you should make it clear before it gets complicated. Look at the way he is acting. He might end up getting deeper into this." During the winter break, Jason asked me out to see a movie. I planned to take this opportunity to clear things up with him. After the movie, I tried to pay him back for the ticket and popcorn, but he absolutely refused. "Emily, are you really going to cut ties with me? Now you want to split this little bit of money too?" I took a deep breath and looked at him with a seriousness I had never shown before. "Jason, He suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. "I know what you're going to say. You don't have feelings for me, do you?" "Emily, how can you be so dense? I've liked you for 3 years, and you just noticed now." Jason's usually calm demeanor made his outburst all the more striking. "I'm sorry, I might be a bit slow, but it's not too late to stop this. You're actually a really great person, but I truly don't have those kinds of feelings for you. I can't just accept your kindness without feeling anything in return." Jason lowered his head, looking hurt. "I understand. You like Lucas, right?" My secret was laid bare. Yes, I felt sorry. I bowed to Jason to express my apologies. Just as I turned to walk away, he caught my wrist. Emily, you don't have to feel burdened by my feelings. It's not a loss for me. I promise to keep my distance, but you at least shouldn't treat me like a stranger. And remember, liking you is my issue. The sacrifices I make for it have nothing to do with you. Just keep moving forward. I'll follow you from behind until I get tired of it. No matter whether it's Lucas Ryan or Jason Lee, both are the kind of people whose brilliance cannot be overshadowed in a crowd. I really feel so lucky. During my sophomore and junior years, I kept taking exams and participating in competitions. Whenever I signed up for something, Jason would follow suit. Most of my roommates were busy in relationships, with some even switching partners 3 times, while I remained alone. In one entrepreneurship competition, I made it to the finals and faced opponents from various prestigious universities. I overheard 2 girls discussing a newly returned business mogul. He's quite impressive. I heard that old man Lou planned to hand over most of his family business to him even before he graduated from undergraduate school. I heard he was kept outside, and it's the legitimate wife's fault no one in the Lou family is ambitious, either completely spoiled or useless. I wasn't particularly interested in this big shot news. I just thought that this person with the surname Lou might be related to Lucas. When I called my grandma, I occasionally asked if she had received any calls from the UK. She said no, but there was a local call she didn't answer. I sighed, guessing it was another scam call. By the time I was in my senior year, I interned at a biopharmaceutical company, and Jason tagged along. For years, he had stayed by my side, remembering my cycle better than I did myself, and he never let the red sugar water and snacks run out. Whenever I transferred money to him, he'd refuse, so I could only invite him out to eat as a way to repay him. Of course, Jason had his admirers. Although he wasn't as striking as Lucas, he was still handsome. He just kept turning them down, sticking by my side instead. I'm not made of stone, after all. My parents had a good impression of Jason and often hinted that I shouldn't be too picky. Someone like Jason, who we know well and comes from a dual-income family, is way more comfortable compared to a rural lifestyle. You should feel lucky to have a guy chasing after you. So what was I waiting for? It had been 5 years, and Lucas hadn't even called me once. As my senior internship was nearing its end, my mom delivered some terrible news. My grandma had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and was in the ICU. When I got the call, Jason was right by my side. I frantically rushed back to my dorm to pack and booked an overnight train ticket home. When I dragged my suitcase out of the dorm, Jason was already waiting for me downstairs, pulling his suitcase along. I'm worried it's not safe for you to travel alone at night. I'll accompany you home. His words nearly brought me to tears. Thank you. When I arrived at the hospital, my grandma was barely breathing. She had been fine when I went to school, and now she looked so frail. I knelt beside her bed, holding her bony hand. My grandma struggled to turn her head, barely lifting an eyelid. Emily, Grandma can't make dumplings for you anymore. Don't blame me. Her voice was thick and soft, almost unable to form words. She glanced at Jason, who was standing beside me. This is your desk mate, right? Grandma knew long ago that you liked him. It's a pity I won't get to see you get married. Jason stood back, unable to hear clearly, while I was already crying uncontrollably. My grandma's breaths became weaker, and the heart rate monitor beeped, prompting everyone in the room to burst into tears. I watched helplessly as her hand turned yellow, and her warmth faded away. The adults took her body to the crematorium while my mom told me to wait at home. When I opened the refrigerator and saw the half-prepared bowl of dumpling filling my grandma had left unfinished, I fell apart again. It was a bowl of uncooked pork and mushroom filling. It took me a full 2 weeks to sort out my feelings. My school internship wasn't over yet, and Jason and I couldn't afford to delay. My eyes had been tearful for days. I returned to my hometown to keep vigil for my grandma, and Jason came along. The adults were busy handling the funeral arrangements, leaving me often unattended. When I finished my tasks and wanted to find something to eat, I realized the meal had already been cleared. Jason personally cooked egg noodles for me using a wood stove. His hands had several burns. On the way back to school, I said to him, "Thank you for being with me during this time." If you still like me after I graduate, let's be together. Jason looked surprised and paused for a long time. He hugged me tightly. Emily, do you know how long I've waited for this day? During the winter break of our senior year, I returned to the old house to sort through my grandma's belongings. My parents and I had already moved out. While searching through her drawers, I found the hairpin Lucas had given me and my grandma's old phone. I charged the phone and discovered a strange number that had called 2 months ago, along with a few voicemail messages. I pressed play to listen. Grandma, this is Lucas. If you see this, could you let Emily know to call this number? I didn't manage to contact her until now due to unavoidable reasons. I wonder if she still remembers me. It doesn't matter if she doesn't, I'm here to return a favor. Please let her know. Just as the phone charged to 2 bars, I received a call from Lucas's number. My hands trembled as I swallowed hard and clicked the call button. A calm and magnetic voice spoke on the other end.
Grandma, I'm hungry.
That sentence instantly transported me back to sophomore year, to the moment Lucas left the classroom with his backpack. I could even remember the strands of hair falling over his eyes and the pale fingers that had held my note. It felt as if the past 5 years had been a dream, and we were still those 2 kids sharing dumplings in an empty classroom. Tears streamed down my face. My grandma is gone. I don't have my grandma anymore. Is this Emily Foster? Are you still living in the same place? When I went to look for you, you had already moved. Lucas's voice was filled with urgency and a hint of joy at having found me again. I clutched my grandma's old phone, unable to hold back my tears. I'm back to clean up my grandma's belongings. So, Lucas still remembered me. He had sought me out. Did I really like Lucas that much? We had spent just over a year together, and now even his appearance felt a bit hazy in my memory. For the past 5 years, I had carefully polished those memories, afraid they would gather dust. I was terrified that when I finally met Lucas again, I would have forgotten our past. Hearing his voice now, knowing he was doing well, felt like enough for me. I wiped down my grandma's things, packing them up along with the rusty hairpin Lucas had given me. As I prepared to head downstairs, I heard the roar of a car engine at the entrance of the alley. I ran to the balcony to look, and a man in a suit with slicked back hair stepped out of a business car. He looked up in the direction of my house, and I finally saw his face clearly. It was Lucas. He had shed the boyishness of his youth, and his features were now more defined. He stared at me on the balcony, as if time had momentarily frozen. Emily Foster, I'm sorry I'm late. I rushed downstairs and collided with Lucas at the corner of the stairs. Just moments ago, I had been doubting whether my feelings for him were an obsession or genuine affection, but in that instant we locked eyes. The answer was clear. My heart raced like never before, reminding me, Emily, the person you love is right in front of you. Lucas seemed even more excited than I was. He pulled me into his embrace. I realized he was taller than when he transferred schools, forcing me to look up at him. Emily Foster, if it weren't for you in this world, I wouldn't have made it this far. He seemed to want to merge me into him, his warmth and heartbeat unexpectedly transmitting to me. I'm sorry I came late. If I had come sooner, would I have been able to see your grandma one more time? His voice was low and filled with regret. The dumplings she made were the best I've ever had. My shoulders became damp with Lucas's tears. We stood in front of my old house, a gentle breeze brushing against us, casting shadows of my hair onto his cheek. We exchanged silent glances, both of our eyes glistening with tears. Sorry, Emily Foster, I was too excited just now. I just hugged you. Lucas's voice was a bit awkward. He took a delicate velvet box out of his pocket. This is what I promised you. I'll replace the diamonds on your hairpin with real ones. The hairpin was adorned with 1-carat diamonds that sparkled in the sunlight. Unconsciously, my eyes reddened again as I playfully punched Lucas. It's been so long, and you didn't even call me. Lucas rubbed his chest where I had punched him and suddenly smiled brightly. Seeing you so lively makes all the gloom in my heart disappear. Leaning against the tree trunk, Lucas's expression turned serious. My dad sent me abroad. He cut off all my connections to my former life, even the phone he gave me was monitored. I felt like I was in prison. My dad wanted to mold me into a business machine to preserve the Liu family's legacy because none of his other children are worth a damn. I had to focus on my studies while also guarding against my stepmother and her 3 kids. Since I returned to take over the business last year, I faced one disaster after another: car accidents, poisonings. I wanted to find you when I came back, but I didn't have a solid foundation yet, and I couldn't let anyone know about you.
Those people are truly unscrupulous.
Lucas's voice grew increasingly somber as he moved closer to me.
Emily Foster, the words I didn't say 5 years ago were, if we could meet again, would you be my girlfriend?
I feel worthy of you now. Suddenly, a loud crash came from across the street. We looked over to see Jason. Oh no, I had forgotten that Jason said he would come to pick me up. Jason tugged at his collar and walked toward us. You're back. It wasn't a question or an accusation, it was as if he had sensed it all along. Lucas nodded. Jason's expression turned serious. You disappeared for 5 years. I've been with Emily for 5 years, going to the same university, attending classes together every day. What gives you the right to come back and ask her to be your girlfriend?
Lucas, what gives you the right?
I found myself caught between the 2 men, wishing I could sink into a crack in the ground. How typical for fate to play tricks like this. Lucas waved to a driver by the side of the road, telling me to wait in the car. I sat in the car, unable to hear what they were saying, but the expressions on their faces didn't look good. It seemed like they were about to fight. About 20 minutes later, Jason handed some snacks to Lucas, then glanced at me sitting in the car. My phone buzzed with a message from Jason. Emily, I'm done with this, I'm leaving. When Lucas got into the car, he placed the snacks on my lap. Where do you live? I'll take you home first. There was an ambiguous smile on his lips as he turned to look at me. Jason was a good guy, no doubt about it. But what was good if just a moment ago they were about to throw punches? I leaned forward, eager to know.
What were you guys just talking about?
Lucas loosened his tie. Oh, nothing much. He just told me you actually always liked me and that you're still single. I stiffened, my heart racing.
What else did he say?
He mentioned that during your graduation party, you got drunk and called my name. Lucas's eyes sparkled with light. But to be honest, if you did choose Jason, I could understand. He likes you as much as I do. The next day, Lucas asked me out for dinner. He seemed to have just come from work, dressed in a suit, but today he appeared much more relaxed, pairing a black wool coat with boots. He walked over looking every bit like a leading man from a K-drama. Emily, have you thought about it? I crossed my arms and walked in front of him. Let's see how you perform first. After all, it had been 5 years since I last saw Lucas, and I knew nothing about what he had been through during that time. Lucas didn't respond and simply followed behind me. I poured out all my questions. When did you start liking me? From the first time you shared your dumplings with me. Back then, your face was round like a dumpling filling, and it was obvious you were well taken care of. Meanwhile, I was so thin and scrawny back then. I slowed my pace and walked alongside Lucas.
So, why did you say you were afraid to come find me before? What made you brave enough to come now?
Old man Lou died. My mom was actually my dad's student. She had no idea he was married until she got pregnant and insisted on marrying him, at which point he confessed. My mom is very proud, and after fighting with my dad, she came to this small city to give birth to me, but she developed severe depression, which later turned into bipolar disorder. Since I can remember, I've been working nonstop to buy medicine for my mom and food for myself. Until the very end, my mom begged my dad to take me away the night before she committed suicide. That was when he found out about his son's existence. He thought my mom had gotten rid of me long ago. I instinctively moved closer to Lucas and held his hand. I don't know if it's because my dad's other kids are worthless or if he feels indebted to my mom, but he poured all his resources into me. My stepmother despises me and tries every means to deal with me. I never wanted to fight for anything. I just wanted what was rightfully mine, but my dad put me in a high position. If I made even a slight mistake, my stepmother's people would find a way to take me down. If I don't compete, I'll die. If I do compete, maybe there's still a way to survive, and I can come back to see you. My dad stroked my face before he died, saying that his current wife was an arranged marriage and that my mom was his one true love. He searched for her for a long time, but when he finally heard from her, it was too late. She had already taken her own life. The entanglements of the previous generation ultimately fall on the children. Lucas's mom probably couldn't accept being an accidental mistress, which led to her demise. But in this way, it destroyed both her and Lucas. Lucas placed my hand in his palm, rubbing it gently. Emily Foster, you know, I almost dropped out of high school to work. I'm glad I met you. He suddenly stopped walking, lowered his eyelashes, and spoke softly. Back then, I felt like a rat in a gutter. Your little kindness was the only light in my life. While studying abroad, I couldn't come and go as I pleased. I had to check in with bodyguards. They watched me like ghosts. Sometimes I wondered what I would do if I came back and couldn't find you. I kept dialing the number you gave me.
But the phone was always off. That's why, as soon as I charged my grandma's phone, you called. When I got through yesterday, I was really afraid it would turn out to be another dead end.
Lucas cautiously leaned in closer to me. I could smell the citrus body wash on him. Emily Foster, could you please pity me a little more and be my girlfriend? I'll give you everything I have. You share half a dumpling with me, and I'll give you the entire Liu family business. By the way, I've been working with chefs to recreate the flavor of the dumplings my grandma used to make from memory. After several tries, it's now officially a brand of frozen food, so I'll give you some too. Really? Please, I'm begging you. Lucas was a whole head taller than me, leaning against my shoulder, making me feel a bit dizzy in the wind. That's quite a hefty dowry you're offering. I, Emily Foster, was just a little bumpkin raised in the countryside. Even though my dad always praised my looks, saying I didn't look like a mountain girl. I did like Lucas, but I never intended to ask for so much from him. I gently patted his back, trying to comfort him like a child. Even though he looked like a domineering CEO, he hadn't changed on the inside. All right, I'll agree to it. At dinner, the table was filled with various delicacies. Foie gras, steak, caviar, things I had only seen in videos. Lucas carefully cut the steak into small pieces and poured a bit of red wine into my glass. I had never drunk before, but I took a big gulp to avoid looking timid in front of Lucas. I pointed to his empty glass.
Why aren't you drinking?
Lucas stared at my flushed face.
If I drink, who's going to drive you home?
True enough. After a satisfying meal, I sat in the back seat of Lucas's car.
Wait, you have a piece of food stuck in your teeth.
Lucas opened the car door and joined me in the back seat, wiping the leftover food from my mouth with a napkin. Our faces were so close that I could feel the heat radiating between us. My gaze unconsciously lingered on Lucas's face. His eyelashes were so long, surely they must tickle his face. The red wine had quite a kick, and my head felt a bit light. Just as I was about to move to the front seat, Lucas held my hand. You're already my girlfriend, a kiss wouldn't be too much, right? That was just a fleeting thought of mine, but my body reacted faster than my brain. My lips brushed against Lucas's. Realizing what I had just done, I quickly pulled back. Lucas's eyes were filled with swirling emotions, misty with longing, as if he were staring at a delicious dumpling. Lucas pinned my hands behind my back with one hand while his other hand cradled my neck. I had only given him a light peck, but Lucas's intensity made it feel like he wanted to devour me whole. He kissed me deeper and deeper, moving from my ear, to my neck, and finally to my collarbone. I felt lightheaded and weak, collapsing against the car door like a soft marshmallow. Let's stop for now, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold back. Lucas released me and moved to the front seat to drive. Through the car window, I caught sight of my reflection, several strands of hair stuck to my forehead, my lips sparkling, and my lipstick nearly gone. I'll take you home first, Lucas said, clearing his throat awkwardly. Lucas and I returned to my hometown, where he renovated my grandma's grave. In front of her spirit tablet, he placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums and a tray of dumplings, then knelt down and bowed 3 heavy times. Mr. Liu, you helped me when I was young, and now that I have the ability to repay you, you are no longer here. His voice was deep, filled with guilt. I can only do my best to take care of Emily and ensure she is as well cared for as she was when you were still around. Outside, a light rain began to fall. Lucas and I knelt side by side before the spirit tablet, bowing deeply in tribute. My heart was filled with memories of my grandma and a profound sense of loss. 6 months later, I graduated from university, and Lucas entrusted me with the financial responsibilities of his company. At the same time, he presented me with a diamond ring and proposed. Emily Foster, at the age of 16, I tasted the best meat bun in the world, and this is my gift to you in return. From now on, I hope you can make a little space in your life for me, okay? We successfully got engaged, and my parents were thrilled, though they felt a sense of regret for Jason. At the engagement party, Jason gifted me a finely crafted sandalwood comb inlaid with mother of pearl. Wishing you both happiness, he said, his voice still gentle. Jason had switched back to wearing the checkered shirts and jeans he used to wear in high school, standing nearby with a somewhat complicated expression. Emily Foster, I think I've never told you why I liked you, he said, a bit nervously. That day when I was late and got caught by the homeroom teacher and had to stand in a corner, it was actually because I was helping a grandmother who had an asthma attack. You were the only one who saw me and stepped forward to clarify things. The way you defended me was like a heroine, even though the teacher didn't believe you and ended up making you stand with me. I paused, surprised, as that memory flashed through my mind, though I only remembered it as a moment of standing up for someone in need. Just then, Lucas approached, holding a glass.
I'm getting engaged, and you're still thinking about trying to steal me away?
I teased. Jason awkwardly turned his head away.
If you ever treat Emily poorly, I wouldn't mind playing the villain.
I took Lucas's hand and led him to another area to toast. Amid the clinking of glasses and laughter, Jason had already left, leaving Lucas and me to enjoy the merriment together.